What if I told you the greatest American rock band of their era, a band that outsold the Beatles in 1969, was built entirely on the songwriting genius of one man, and that man was sued for stealing from himself, not by a stranger, not by a rival, by the label that had already taken everything he owned. He wrote the song they said he stole. He owned nothing because they had stripped that from him years before, and when he stood up to fight back, they made him prove in open court, with a guitar in his hands and a jury watching in silence, that a man can write two songs that sound like him without committing a crime against himself. He won. It cost him over $1 million and a decade of his career. And the man who sued him used the profits from his music to win 3 Academy Awards. If you haven't done so, like and subscribe. Here is how John Fogerty wrote every song Creedence Clearwater Revival ever recorded, lost the rights to all of it, and then got sued for sounding like himself. To understand what Saul Zaentz did to John Fogerty, you have to understand what John Fogerty was. He was not a hired hand. He was not a session player filling a role someone else designed. He was the architect, the writer, the arranger, the lead guitarist, the lead vocalist, and the creative engine behind one of the most distinctive sounds in the history of American music. Everything that made Creedence Clearwater Revival identifiable, the swamp rock growl, the bayou-drenched guitar tone, the working-class urgency that ran through every lyric, came from one person. John Fogerty built that sound from scratch in his head and put it on tape, and he built it fast. Between 1968 and 1972, CCR released 6 albums. 3 of them landed in the Billboard Top 10 in 1969 alone. That year, 1969, the band reportedly sold more records than the Beatles, not in one market, globally. Proud Mary, Bad Moon Rising, Fortunate Son, Down on the Corner, Green River, 5 singles from that single calendar year. The radio could not get enough. The country could not get enough. CCR were everywhere. You heard those songs? You know exactly where you were when certain ones played. That was the point. Fogerty wrote music that planted itself inside a specific moment in your life and never left. And he owned none of it. The band had signed to Fantasy Records as teenagers, signed before they had the leverage to negotiate, before they had a lawyer worth trusting, before they understood what the words in a recording contract actually meant. When Saul Zaentz bought Fantasy Records in 1967, he inherited that contract, and he enforced every clause of it without apology. Low royalty rates, a mandatory output quota that kept the band on a production treadmill, and full ownership of the recordings and the publishing, meaning every song John Fogerty ever wrote for CCR belonged to Fantasy Records the moment it was finished. Fogerty called it, decades later, unending horrible legal slavery. When CCR disbanded in 1972, Fogerty went solo, but the contract did not end with the band. Zaentz held him to it. Fogerty tried to get free of Fantasy and eventually had to forfeit the rights to his solo recordings just to escape. Then, to get off Fantasy entirely for North American rights, he signed to Asylum Records, and was required to surrender the publishing rights to every song he had written under his previous contracts. He had given Fantasy the songs. Now, he gave them the rights to the songs about giving Fantasy the songs. By 1980, Fogerty had relinquished his royalties entirely. The songs were still playing. The money was still moving. It just was not moving to him. Meanwhile, Saul Zaentz was doing very well. The profits from CCR's catalog were funding a film production career. In 1975, Zaentz produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It won 5 Academy Awards. In 1984, he produced Amadeus, another 5. The man who held John Fogerty's music hostage was collecting Oscars, and Fogerty had gone quiet. For years, he refused to perform CCR songs live. Every ticket sold put money in Zaentz's pocket. It was suicide for his career, and he knew it, but he could not bring himself to do it. Then, in 1985, he came back. But here is the turn. The comeback should have been a triumph, and for a moment, it was. Centerfield dropped in January of 1985 and went to #1 in the United States, Norway, and Sweden. The album was sharp, confident, and unmistakably Fogerty, swamp rock DNA running through every track. After years of silence, the voice was back. The guitar was back. The radio wanted it. The public wanted it. John Fogerty had walked away from the wilderness and landed on top of the charts. Saul Zaentz was not celebrating. The album contained a song called Zans Can't Dance. The lyrics were not subtle. The character described in the song, a man who takes your money, who cannot create anything himself, who profits from the work of others, was not a fictional invention. Critics understood it immediately. Fans understood it immediately. Zaentz understood it immediately. He sued for $144 million. Defamation. The claim was that Fogerty had portrayed him as, in Zaentz's own legal language, a thief, a robber, an adulterer, and a murderer. Fogerty settled. The song was renamed Vans Can't Dance on subsequent pressings. The money changed hands quietly, but Zaentz was not finished, because buried on that same album, right at the top of side 1, was The Old Man Down the Road. It was the lead single. It charted. It was everything a comeback single was supposed to be. A rolling, driving, swamp rock groove with Fogerty's signature guitar tone snaking through the whole thing. Fantasy Records listened to it. And then Fantasy Records filed a copyright infringement lawsuit claiming that The Old Man Down the Road was simply Run Through the Jungle with different words. Here is what nobody tells you about that claim. He got the eyes, black coat. He got a suitcase, the devil's on the loose. Run Through the Jungle was written by John Fogerty in 1970. He wrote it, he recorded it. He played every note that mattered on it. Fantasy Records owned the copyright because Fogerty had been required to hand it over under the terms of a contract he signed as a teenager. So, the lawsuit stated plainly was this: John Fogerty had plagiarized John Fogerty. A man was being sued in federal court for stealing from himself, for writing a song that sounded like his own work, for having a style, a specific, identifiable, decades-deep musical voice, and using it twice. Fogerty did not settle this one. He later said he felt Lennon, Dylan, Springsteen, and Lieber and Stoller standing behind him. What was at stake, he told Rolling Stone, was whether a person could continue to use their own style as they grow and go on through life. He understood that if fantasy won, every songwriter with a recognizable voice was suddenly at risk of being sued by whoever happened to own their early work. He was going to fight it, and there was one more detail that made the whole thing cut even deeper. The person who had first pointed out the similarities between the two songs to Saul Zaentz, the person whose observation had lit the fuse on the lawsuit, was Doug Clifford, the drummer of Creedence Clearwater Revival, Fogerty's own bandmate. A man who had stood on the same stage, played on the same records, and shared in the same sound for years. Fogerty found out in court. The trial happened in 1988. Federal court. A jury of 12 people who had not spent their careers thinking about the architecture of swamp rock guitar riffs was asked to determine whether one John Fogerty had illegally copied another John Fogerty. The attorneys argued. The musicologists testified. Charts were produced. Waveforms were analyzed. Expert witnesses explained, in the dry language of copyright law, the difference between a style and a song, between an influence and an infringement, between a man writing in his own voice and a man stealing from someone else's. And then John Fogerty picked up a guitar. He walked to the witness stand, sat down, and played both songs for the jury. Not a recording, not a demonstration track. Him, live. In a federal courtroom, in front of 12 silent strangers, he performed Run Through the Jungle, and then he performed The Old Man Down the Road, and he let the room decide whether they were the same song. Think about what that moment actually was. One of the defining voices of American rock and roll sitting in a courthouse, having to prove to a jury that he had not plagiarized his own guitar playing, that the sound in his hands, The sound he had developed over decades, the sound that had sold tens of millions of records, the sound that had made Saul Zaentz wealthy enough to produce Oscar-winning films, was still legally his to use. The jury ruled in his favor, but here is the kicker. Winning cost him over $1 million in legal fees. $1 million to defend himself against the charge of sounding like himself. And when the verdict came in, Fantasy Records was sitting on $1.5 million in royalties they had placed in escrow during the lawsuit, money that was technically owed to Fogerty, but had been frozen while the case dragged through the courts. He told reporters afterward that Fantasy hadn't paid him a single dollar since filing the suit. He stood outside the courthouse and suggested, only half joking, that everyone go over to Fantasy's offices right then and collect it. And it was not over. Fogerty argued that since Fantasy had lost, they should pay his legal fees. The logic was straightforward. He had won. They had brought a case that a jury rejected completely. He had spent $1 million defending himself against a suit that should never have been filed. He wanted that money back. The court said no. The ruling was that Fantasy's suit had been neither frivolous nor brought in bad faith. Fogerty appealed. In 1993, the appeals court denied him again, and the panel was split down the middle, half agreeing with Fogerty and half disagreeing, which tells you everything about how close the question actually was. So, Fogerty took it to the Supreme Court of the United States. In 1994, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in his favor. Chief Justice William Rehnquist wrote the opinion. In it, he noted that Creedence Clearwater Revival had been recognized as one of the greatest American rock and roll groups of all time. The court ruled that prevailing defendants in copyright cases deserved the same standard for recovering legal fees as prevailing plaintiffs. It was a landmark ruling. It changed copyright law. It protected every musician, writer, and artist who might someday be dragged into court by someone who owned their early work. John Fogerty had gone from the witness stand to the Supreme Court. The whole journey took 9 years. You probably owned a CCR album. You probably sang along to Proud Mary without knowing who wrote it. You heard Fortunate Son and felt something true in it and never once thought about what it cost the man who wrote it.
You don't have to worry, you have no it ain't me, it ain't me.
That is how it was supposed to work. The music was everywhere. The injustice was invisible. While Fogerty was fighting in courtrooms, Zaentz was walking red carpets. The English Patient won 9 Academy Awards in 1997. Saul Zaentz accepted the Oscar for Best Picture. The man who had sued John Fogerty for sounding like himself was one of the most celebrated film producers in Hollywood. And the foundation of that career was built on the royalties from songs Fogerty wrote as a teenager under a contract he did not fully understand. The irony does not stop there. Fogerty refused to play CCR songs live for more than a decade. He described the choice exactly for what it was: career suicide. Your audience wants to hear the songs they love. They do not want to hear you explain why you cannot play them. Every night he walked off stage without playing Bad Moon Rising or Green River or Have You Ever Seen the Rain? Was a night his legend quietly dimmed while his catalog kept generating money for someone else. He attempted to buy back his publishing from Zaentz in 1989. They agreed on a number. Then, at the last minute, Zaentz doubled the price. The deal collapsed. Fogerty waited. He outlasted Zaentz, who died in 2014. When Concord Records acquired Fantasy in 2004, they immediately reinstated Fogerty's royalties and increased the rate. It was the first money he had seen from those songs in decades, and in January of 2023, 50 years after CCR dissolved, 50 years after Fogerty first understood what he had signed away, he bought back the majority of his publishing rights. He said he was still in shock. He said he hadn't let his brain fully feel it yet. 50 years is a long time to wait to own something you created. Here is what stays with you after all of it. John Fogerty did not lose because he was untalented. He did not lose because the music wasn't good enough or the audience didn't care. He lost because he was young, and he signed a piece of paper. and the man on the other side of that paper understood exactly what it meant, and Fogerty did not. That is the oldest story in the music business, but very few versions of it go as deep, or last as long, or carry as much bitter irony as this one. The songwriter who defined an era of American music spent 50 years fighting to own what he created. He sat in a courtroom and played his own guitar to prove he hadn't stolen from himself. He went all the way to the Supreme Court over legal fees. He watched the man who took his songs collect Academy Awards, and the songs never stopped playing, not once. Through every lawsuit, every appeal, every year of silence, every canceled tour, Proud Mary kept rolling. Fortunate Son kept ringing true. The music was bigger than all of it. It just took 50 years for the man who wrote it to own it again. Next time The Old Man Down the Road comes on, and it will, think about what it cost him to prove that song was his. If this one hit you, go ahead and smack that like button and subscribe. And to my subscribers, you are the fortunate ones. You rock.